Imagine a hot summer in July 1518 in the bustling city of Strasbourg. Life was ordinary until it suddenly wasn't. It all started with a single person. A woman known as Frau Troffea stepped into a narrow cobblestone street alone. Without any music, she began to dance. Her movements were not joyful, but frantic, compulsive, and filled with a strange energy. Her neighbors watched, first with curiosity, then with growing concern. She didn't stop for a moment, simply dancing on and on. Day turned into night, and night into day, yet she continued her bizarre performance, her body seemingly not her own. She danced for nearly a week without rest. Her feet were swollen, and her body was racked with exhaustion, but she could not stop. Her husband pleaded with her to stop, but she was lost in a trance, unable to hear or respond to anyone around her. The strange spectacle drew larger crowds. People whispered, speculating about curses, divine intervention, or simple madness. This was not a celebration. It was the beginning of something terrifying, an event that would go down in history. Little did they know, Frau Troffea's strange dance was just the first note in a symphony of mass hysteria. Then, the unthinkable happened. Within that first week, another person joined in, mirroring Frau Troffea's frantic movements. Soon, a third and fourth person were swept up in the compulsion. The strange affliction appeared to be contagious. By the end of the week, more than 30 people were dancing day and night, their bodies held captive by the mysterious urge. The dancers didn't seem to know each other. They were men, women, and even some older children from all walks of life. The streets of Strasbourg, once filled with the sounds of commerce, were now filled with the shuffling and stomping of feet. There was no joy in their movements. Their faces were twisted in anguish, and some were reportedly crying out for help as they danced. The city's authorities and physicians were completely baffled. They had never witnessed anything like this bizarre, spreading phenomenon. Panic began to set in among the general populace. Was it a disease? A curse? Nobody had any answers. The numbers continued to swell each day, as more and more citizens were inexplicably drawn into the relentless dance. What had started with one woman had now become a full-blown epidemic, a dancing plague that was consuming the city. Desperate for a solution, the city's leaders convened an emergency meeting with the most respected physicians of the time. After examining the dancers, the physicians ruled out astrological or supernatural causes, landing on a natural explanation. They diagnosed the affliction as hot blood, a common medical theory of the era for a feverish or manic state. Their recommended cure was as strange as the plague itself. The dancers needed to dance the fever out of their systems. The authorities embraced this medical advice. They decided to facilitate the dancing, hoping it would lead to a swift recovery. Their logic was simple. If the dancers continued until they collapsed from exhaustion, the fever would surely break. So, the city council ordered the clearing of guild halls and open-air markets to create designated dancing spaces for the afflicted. They even went a step further, deciding that music would help keep the dancers moving and aid the healing process. Professional musicians were hired, and a wooden stage was constructed. The city was about to orchestrate the plague. It was a well-intentioned plan based on flawed science, a mistake that would have devastating and tragic consequences. With official sanction, the bizarre spectacle was amplified. Musicians on the new stage began to play pipes, drums, and horns. The music, intended to help, had the opposite effect. It seemed to intensify the dancers' frenzy and draw in more onlookers. Some onlookers, perhaps mesmerized by the rhythm and the strange sight, found their own feet starting to move uncontrollably. The plague's numbers exploded. By August, it is estimated that as many as 400 people were caught in the dancing mania. The city's plan to contain and cure the problem had instead created a massive, non-stop dance party with a terrifying edge. Professional, healthy dancers were even hired to dance alongside the afflicted, hoping to guide their movements and tire them out. This intervention also failed. The hired dancers would tire and stop, but the afflicted simply kept going, day after day. The city of Strasbourg had become a living nightmare, a surreal theater of perpetual motion that no one could shut down. The authorities watched in horror as their prescribed cure fueled the very disease they were trying to fight. The constant motion and lack of rest began to push the human body past its absolute limits, leading to grim results. The human body is not designed for such relentless activity. The first dancers began to collapse from sheer exhaustion. Many suffered from severe dehydration under the hot summer sun, their pleas for water lost in the chaotic scene. Historical accounts report that many of the dancers perished from strokes, heart attacks, and complete physical exhaustion. At the plague's peak, some chroniclers claim that up to 15 people were perishing each day from the dancing. The scene in the square turned from bizarre to grim as the bodies of the fallen had to be carried away. The nonstop motion caused severe pain. Dancers' feet were described as swollen and raw, but still they could not stop. Families watched helplessly as their loved ones danced themselves towards their demise, unable to intervene or break the spell. The music, once thought to be a cure, now sounded like a funeral dirge accompanying the tragic spectacle. The city's grand experiment had failed, and the death toll was the undeniable proof of their catastrophic misjudgment. Strasbourg was in the grip of a deadly plague where the symptom and the cause of demise were one and the same: dancing. Faced with a rising body count, the terrified city council finally admitted their plan was a disaster and reversed course. In a dramatic reversal, all public dancing was strictly forbidden. The city that encouraged dancing now outlawed it. The stage was dismantled, and the musicians were sent home. An eerie silence began to fall over the city. The medical explanation of hot blood was abandoned. The blame was now shifted towards a supernatural cause. The council declared that the dancers were suffering from the wrath of Saint Vitus, a saint known to inflict curses of compulsive dancing. The new cure was no longer medical, but spiritual. The dancers would have to seek forgiveness and penance. This was a common response to unexplained crises in the 16th century. When medicine failed, faith was the last resort. The remaining dancers, still twitching and moving weakly, were rounded up for the next phase of their ordeal. They were isolated from the general public, and a plan was made to transport them to a place of healing. The city hoped that by appealing to a higher power, they could finally break the curse that had gripped them for weeks. The new plan involved a pilgrimage. The remaining dancers were loaded onto wagons to be taken out of Strasbourg. Their destination was a remote shrine high in the Vosges Mountains, a place dedicated to Saint Vitus himself. The journey was arduous. The dancers, though weakened, continued their spasmodic movements even on the moving carts. They were taken to a grotto where a statue of Saint Vitus stood, a place believed to hold curative powers. Here, they were to pray for forgiveness. Priests held masses and performed rituals to appease the angered saint. The dancers were given small wooden crosses to hold and had red shoes placed upon their still-moving feet. They were led around the altar of Saint Vitus, a final ritualized dance to hopefully end all the dancing. Whether it was the power of belief, the change of scenery, or sheer exhaustion, something at the shrine began to work. Within a few weeks of arriving at the shrine, reports claimed that most of the remaining dancers had finally stopped. The bizarre and terrifying dancing plague, which had held a city captive for months, was finally coming to an end. Back in Strasbourg, the last of the dancers had been taken away. An uncanny silence fell over the city. The streets, once filled with the constant sound of stomping feet and music, were now quiet and deserted. The survivors of the plague slowly began to recover, their bodies and minds scarred by the weeks of ceaseless motion. The city was left to count the cost, not just in lives lost, but in the collective trauma inflicted on its people. Records of the event were written by stunned officials and chroniclers, trying to make sense of the madness they witnessed. The dancing plague of 1518 became a chilling local legend, a cautionary tale whispered for generations. For centuries, the story remained just that. A bizarre historical footnote, too strange to seem entirely real. But the event was very real, documented in multiple contemporary sources, from city council notes to sermons and chronicles. The question lingered through the centuries, haunting historians and scientists alike. What actually caused it? The end of the dancing was not the end of the story. The search for a rational explanation was just beginning. Modern science has proposed several theories to explain the dancing plague. One of the most popular involves a toxic fungus. This theory points to ergot, a mold that can grow on the stalks of damp rye, a common grain for making bread. Consuming ergot-contaminated bread can lead to a condition called ergotism, which has two forms: gangrenous and convulsive. The convulsive form causes painful muscle spasms, twitching, and hallucinations, which sound somewhat similar to the plague's symptoms. The idea is that the citizens of Strasbourg ate contaminated bread, leading to mass poisoning and these bizarre symptoms. However, many experts now doubt the ergotism theory. For one, it doesn't usually cause coordinated, dance-like movements. The victims of ergotism are typically too sick and in too much pain to dance for days on end. Furthermore, it's unlikely that a poison would affect hundreds of people in such a uniform, specific way without other symptoms. While a compelling idea, the poison theory doesn't quite fit all the facts of the historical accounts. This leads most modern historians to the most likely and perhaps most unsettling explanation of all: The leading theory today is not biological, but psychological, a case of mass psychogenic illness, also known as mass hysteria. This is a phenomenon where a group of people under extreme stress can begin to exhibit similar physical symptoms without a physical cause. To understand this, we must look at the world of 1518. Strasbourg was suffering from severe famine, poverty, and rampant diseases. The psychological stress on the population was immense. They lived in a world of constant anxiety, hardship, and deep religious belief. The belief in curses, like that of Saint Vitus, was not a fringe idea. It was a core part of their reality. Frau Troffea's initial dance, perhaps a personal psychological break, acted as a trigger in this high-stress environment. Others, seeing her and believing in the curse, subconsciously manifested the same symptoms. The hysteria became a social contagion. The authorities' decision to encourage more dancing only validated the hysteria, making it seem real and officially sanctioned. The dancing plague serves as a chilling reminder of the power of the human mind to affect the body on a massive scale. It remains one of history's most bizarre chapters, an unsolved mystery that shows how reality can be shaped by collective fear and belief.